Good evening, everybody. Let's start this session on Bridge Forum 2023, although it takes place in 2024. It is the fourth session of this cycle. While the whole thing with the panel discussions, we started in spring 2022. So it's almost 2 years that we are doing these kinds of activities. Some of them on site, few of them, but mostly online. It is focused on what we consider important problems for the region, for Albania and for other countries in the Western Balkans. This is due also to the support of this session, as also the previous one of last year, due to the support of the agency for the support of civil society of Albania, and also in cooperation, which is crucial for us, cooperation with ISEC, an international organization of students, the Albanian branch. This is crucial for us because so they can help us to find the audience, which are mostly young people. This session, the topic of this session, as you know, is corruption, transparency, and the media. Transparency and the media. So let me briefly introduce the topic, say some few words. The transparency is very important to fight in order to fight corruption. And also then the media has a special role in this respect to make transparency. On the other hand, media can sensibilize the public opinion against the phenomenon of corruption. Corruption is not just that some few people are making money, are getting richer by unscrupulous, by shameful ways of making money. It is that it affects the whole society in different respects. For instance, about social justice, about polarization and social inequalities. We have, let me give you some data that the countries that are with less corruption, they are more egalitarian, like the Nordic countries of Europe, for instance. And the countries that have more corruption are more polarized socially, economically, like in Latin America. It also affects democracy. It is related. There is a correlation between corruption and authoritarian capitalist societies. Like we have the instance of the regime of Orban, of the regime of Vladimir Putin, that are corrupt regimes and authoritarian at the same time. They are closely related. These things, the corruption and authoritarianism, and we have also this phenomenon and this kind of correlation in the Balkan countries, as you know. Now, in this session, we have the panelists that are of younger generation than those of the previous sessions of Bridge Forum 2023. They are both. They grew up after the change of the regime. They were very young. They were children when the communist regime collapsed. One of them is Amila from Bosnia and Herzegovina. She had an unfortunately important experience when she lived, being a child She lived through the siege of Sarajevo, when Sarajevo have been shelled and under siege for a period of 4 years, the longest in the history of humanity, or at modern times, let's say. And now she is a well-known journalist and writer. She started as a journalist. Now she's dedicating more to literature, and she's among the most well-known of her generation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The other panelist is Adon. Adon is a researcher in the Institute of History of the Academic of Science of Albania, and he's a lecturer also in the University of Tirana, although his spectrum or his span of intellectual interest is larger than history, by all means. Interests about political and social and cultural issues. So first, I will leave the floor to them, and then we, as always, will have a dialogue with the public by questions and answers. So I give the floor to you, Amila.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. And I think we already got used to these online meetings because we had this unfortunate pandemic behind us. So first of all, thank to our host for these very kind words and kind introduction. Also, thank you for inviting me to this very important panel with this very important subject, because it is very controversial here in Balkans, but it is also deeply and fundamentally political subject. Also both in globally and in Balkan context, or in context of Southeastern Europe, whatever we mean under Southeastern Europe, which is also a problematical concept written about by many contemporary scientists who problematize Europe and Eurocentrism, concepts of Southeastern Europe, and so on. So thank you very much for inviting me and for presenting me in such a kind way. I will also add that I worked a few years as a journalist, but also I worked several years as a media analyst for famous internet analyst group Analiziraj Ba, that's in Bosnian. So let's skip to our subject now, because I prepared a few brief ideas about today's subjects and about the notions that we are used in this subject, because so it is corruption, transparency in media, very interrelated terms. Corruption and transparency became widely known thanks to media, because when media weren't spreading those ideas, it was basically unknown to vast majority of people. So media had a fundamental role in posing standards of transparency in speaking about corruption in a society. So what are we considered about today is what are those notions fundamentally? Because people tend to underestimate the words that are used very widely. We just understand them as something which is said by itself, like we don't have to explain it. But explaining those notions of corruption, of transparency, and of media will show how all of those are deeply politically impacting our everyday life. And what are the possible meanings of these words is also important, because neither corruption, neither transparency, neither media didn't mean the same to every participant of social life. Politicians think about it in one way, public thinks about it a second way, and a media thinking about it third way, and human rights activists think about it four ways. So it's not a notion that has one single meaning. Neither of those notions has one single meaning. And also it is very important how to contextualize them and what it means in a context of today's Balkans. So let's start with what are those notions. Neither of these notions is neutral. There are no, if contemporary philosophy from postmodernism to now on has learned us anything, it is that there are no neutral notions. Neither of these notions is not neutral, and each one of them has a deep meaning, has a deep function in a society, and really sometimes poses a threat to political centers of power. Corruption is, I'll start with the notion of corruption. Corruption is a very, very widely considered and reconsidered problem and notion in a contemporary liberal and neoliberal democratic societies. However, it always somehow like it skips our attention, because we tend to think about corruption solely about financial criminals, but it's not. It's much more. It is in question of positions of power. It is in question of military policies. It is in question of human rights. It all can be ruined by a corruption. So it's not just me giving money to you to be silent about something. It is much more. Corruption is much, much wider concept, also in a world of media. Transparency, for as much as I know it and as much as I read about transparency, is a very strange notion. Why? Because transparency has ranges, and those ranges determine is something transparent or not, because things and processes can be or transparent or intransparent. There is, as my experience says, and I worked as a media analyst, there is very, very few things that are really transparent in society. Usually things are transparent as much as the political centers of power allow it to be transparent. Therefore, we have a lot of, for example, here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, every government company now, every government, because we have 14 governments, unfortunately, every political organization, every hospital that is run by politic organizations, because here everything is run by politic organizations and politic parties, has its own PR. And that PR or public relation person releases just a tiny bit of information every day, exactly every day in a public, and they call it transparency. But 99% of processes and many money transactions remain hidden. So they're like playing transparency, if I can say it like that. In this context, I like an idea that Slavoj Žižek, when he still was a very serious philosopher, wrote in his book, The Parallax View. In such a positions, transparency is proving to be actually the fundamental form of intransparency. And when we think about media, because we have young people here, like our host said, media, yes, I grew up after the collapse of socialist regime. But I also remember that notion of media before internet was very centralized. We had medias were radio stations, television, and newspapers. That was media, nothing else. Now, the concept of media has become very, very broad. Beside those traditional medias that are slowly losing their impact on the society, we have a new media, social media, blogs, websites, and portals that do have political background. We also have an independent political YouTube channels, especially here in Bosnia. When somebody fights with his own political party and he's forbidden to enter television, first thing he does is open a Facebook channel or YouTube channel and speaks all the dirty laundry that he knows from that party. So it is also a form of media widely followed by people. So I basically made some sort, if I can say, like a taxonomy of media. We have traditional medias, like I said, radio stations, televisions, and newspapers, which are now in these years after war, basically in the hands of governments and in corporative hands. And they have a financial power which extends their popularity, if I can say. There are also independent media signed as an independent, but there is a question, they're independent from who? Because who funds them? That is very, very important question. So this independent media, they do exist as an independent from state, but is there an absolute independency? I'm not sure about it. And also there are medias that I call the free ones. And those are media led by enthusiastic people, no matter the political spectrum they are on. They're unprofitable. They are usually on free channels like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, I don't know how it's not X now instead of Twitter, right? So those three groups of media are differing to a high extent in funding, in a political message, in a political impact, and on the group of people they are having impact, because those free media, new media, social media primarily are followed by very young people. And traditional media like TV news and or weekly newspapers who are not selling very good. It's just few hundreds of papers that are sold, I think, monthly in Bosnia. They're followed by the older generation who still tend to believe in those media because they're considered traditional. And traditional psychologically to people means something that you can trust. And these new medias are something, no, you can't trust that. And in between, their media considered independent, like they're independent from government, but funded by primarily Organization for Human Rights. And those media are not very trusted by these older people because they believe that they are installed to corrupt our societies. That is usual narrative for those people. So, and they perceive those independent media funded by foreign organizations and Organization for Human Rights, they consider it in a way we consider contemporary think tanks as somebody who is paid to produce a particular ideology. So it produces some sort of media discrepancy in a society. And also it produces the clash of narratives between not just various nationalists or nationalities or nationalist groups, but or not just between different political agendas, but also between people regarding of their age, of their gender, and of their education level. So it produces a clash of narratives, which, yes, of course, it gives a lot to social freedom, but it also produces the other forms of I can say social collapse, in meaning of misunderstanding, of hate speech, especially, and of also various other forms of tightening relations in society, which is especially problematic in complex societies, like all of those former Yugoslav countries where we have multiple nationalities in country, and each one of them produces their own media, their own state media, their own political media, their own traditional media, their own independent media, and so on and so on. When we enter much more deeper into these problematics, we see that corruption, like I said, can be, of course, and it usually is financial, but it doesn't mean paying money from one bill to another in order to do something or not to do something. It is also very related to an impact that economy has on a society. It also produces a pressure on traditional media that want to stay independent. I will give you just one example. There is one magazine, the most widely known satirical magazine in former Yugoslavia, and I also think wider, Feral Tribune, which was in Split in Croatia. They were really making parody of all the politicians and all the politics parties and from all the ideologies. They were really not afraid of anyone. In 2008, and they were selling good, but you know, when internet came, their selling was a little lower, not very enough for them to sustain. And they relied on advertisement because they were solidly good sold paper. Croatian government was putting pressure on them to stop criticizing government, but they didn't want to. So the government put pressure on the companies to put pressure on another companies, you know, the companies that are related with Croatian government. They put a pressure on their cooperative companies to stop advertising in Feral Tribune in order to shut them. And unfortunately, they succeeded. In 2008, the last issue of Feral Tribune was released, and it was like, goodbye. So this is also a form of corruption, more dangerous, more fundamental, and much harder to get in trace of that corruption, because financial corruption, as my experience says, it is an easier form of corruption to discover. It's just enough to have approach to bills, to financial transaction, and you have a financial corruption on paper. This form of political corruption and political pressure, which is corruption per se, you can't really trace very easily. So therefore, the corruption is not just a criminal behavior, but it is a fundamentally and deeply political operation in order to shut free speech, every form of free speech. When we speak about free medias, for example, YouTube channels and Facebook channels, this form of corruption is basically consisted in reporting them, trying to shut them down. And when it is not possible, then in, I quote, exposing them as the enemies of the state, as the enemy of our people, and stuff like that. So the next question would be, what is transparency? Because corruption and transparency are very related, because the corruption can be defined as a lack of transparency. That's why transparency is very, very important. Sometimes, like I said, government and organizations are playing the transparency on the surface by giving us tiny bit of information and telling us that, you know, we are being transparent and that's it. You know what we tell you to know. And the digging deeper is always dangerous because they will accuse you, and it is very, very strong accusation in a context of our countries, that you are the enemy of the people, that you are the enemy of the state, that you are working for our neighboring enemies. So it really is aimed to shut down any freedom of speech. And that is the fundamental form of transparency. And when we speak about context of those terms, it is very important to understand that there is not just one society, one context, but in every society, there are multiple contexts, and sometimes those contexts intersect. And that's what makes space for very heavy fights in a media field, but also for very heavy accusations and for shutting freedom of speech down. The best example is the matter which I call the point of view. From whose point of view something is corrupted or transparent, because free speech journalists and free speech activists will define those terms in a different manner than the, I don't know, president of some political party or a general of an army. So, for example, nationalist, or what we call state media in the countries of former countries of former Yugoslav state, accuse independent media or media considered as an independent for corruption, because they say you are funded from foreign governments and international organizations, and you are aimed to destroy our traditional values, to bring everything we believe in question, and to endanger our sovereignty. But also vice versa, those independent media accuse state media or nationalist media to be politically corrupted. We know what's the truth, but vast majority of people will find themselves confused between those two sides, and they will conclude, as this young man in a question, so we can't trust anyone. That's where media analysts and fact checkers enter the scene and check everything that is said. Always question everything you said, just question it. So the fundamental question here would be, is it possible to have fully independent media, especially when we have internet? This can seem a little bit paradoxical because, like I said before, there is a lot of free media on internet, but does it add to a freedom of traditional media? I'm not sure, because it really narrows their market and their market reach. Because you have to pay for traditional media, you have to buy newspapers, you have to pay tax for television or radio, and for internet you just need to have an internet connection. So this form of transparency and of money politics, of economy and taxonomy of the internet versus traditional media actually narrows possibility of traditional media to be independent. So that is very, very important thing to understand. So a paradox question would be, did internet on one side of the coin democratize media, and on the other led to produce more of freedom but less of market for traditional media? This would be also not a problem just of corruption and transparency, but also a problem of media as a concept. And my very, very interesting question for me is, are we basically witnessing the slow death of traditional media? And that would also be important to consider. And there is also one thing in the context of Balkans, that is the last thing I'm going to say, because I'm speaking almost 20 minutes and I don't want to take too much of your time, is the problem of national broadcast services in former Yugoslavia. They're primarily controlled by political parties that are in government in that very moment. When they lose government and somebody else comes, then those media are under control of that other political party, and so on and so on. So when we have this form of state-funded media, and we don't have a real democracy, but rather a partitocracy, can we actually expect the national broadcasts to be reliable and to be free and to be independent? I'm not very sure. Because they always produce the same frame narrative. Our country, our state, our people, our language, our freedom, our independency, our sovereignty. And inside that frame, they inscribe anything that is that works for political parties that are currently in power. And that's why those important notions of country, of state, of independence, of sovereignty, and so on are basically losing their strength in a public space. Also, when producing news, that's what we mostly noticed when analyzing. They have desirable subjects, desirable themes, and desirable interlocutors. So they will never, ever, ever call somebody who is totally independent intellectual to be their guest on a television. If they are proponents of one party, yes, they will call somebody who has another opinion, but somebody from that other option who is not well educated, who is going just to produce a conflict, not solve anything, and who will basically not endanger of their preferred guest who belongs to a certain political party. But unfortunately, what we also witnessed is that every time media discovers the corruption, the narrative that press is enemy and the press is foreign agent aimed to destroy a country is released. Always the same story. And it is very interesting that in all those not democratic countries, the story is always the same. So the Putin will say the same story as Alexander Vucic. It is always the same. Media who discovers corruption is an enemy. And he's not discovering corruption because he likes justice, but the media is discovering corruption because he wants to ruin our society, and he's paid to ruin our society. When I say our, I don't think my own, but like it's a narrative, our society, our country, our politics, and so on. But unfortunately, and I will conclude with this, the latest global developments proved that even Western liberal media are prone to some sort of self-censorship. And it will be very, very interesting to see how this story about media hiding certain stories and crimes, how it will be developed, how that story will unfold, because it will show us the way that we will go in developing free media. It will show us problems we are going to meet in developing our free media free of corruption, and media that has transparency. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Amila, for your presentation, for your complex and at the same time very clear presentation. I like to say that Amila has collaborated with us, with our association, which is called The Bridge, in the magazine that we publish. She has written articles, she has made interviews, and also Adon has a background of cooperation with us here by his contribution to our magazine. Now I give the floor to Adon, and then afterwards we answer to the question that will come.
Thank you.
Are already coming.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. And I will catch immediately the opportunity offered by Amila with some issues which are very important, and as I can see, are very similar between Albania and Bosnia. First of all, let's see if we have a sort of agreement, as the saying goes, about the terms of reference in this panel. Because it seems to me that it is not really important what corruption actually is, rather than what it is perceived to be. At least, I mean, what it is perceived to be in the public eye. What is that phenomenon that we call by the name of corruption in Albania nowadays? And let me say that this is a very, very used term, as Amila said before, to the point of being almost an abused term. We can say, we can try, at least, I would say, to locate it, to locate the term corruption, to see where corruption does occur, in order to understand better what public opinion in Albania means by calling it in that way. And even defining it as the biggest problem each time that Albania, as an official EU candidate country, fails to meet the required criteria vis-à-vis its integration path. Well, for the general public opinion in Albania, corruption is a political issue. Let's state this: corruption as a political issue, which is to say that corruption as a problem is related to that milieu or that elite by which Albanians generally define the officials of the state. I mean in the broader sense of the word, being the state represented by its official in the executive power, in parliament, in the courts, and of course in the local branches of the government. So, pertaining to this definition, corruption is a notorious affair which regards a very small portion of the Albanian society. A very small portion. Ministers mostly, members of the parliament, of course judges, and other courts officials too, and etc., etc. So, moreover, by corruption, the general public refers usually not only to the high officials, but also to a middle range of them embodied in the public administration. This ultimate location of where corruption does lie in the Albanian perception always is very significant. And I would say that there is a reason behind it. First of all, because the public encounter with the phenomenon of corruption happens effectively in the public administration offices. The frequency of the contacts between citizens and these middle range officials is higher than with ministers or members of the parliament. So this is a first reason why corruption is perceived to be only in the state, not in society. But also, and this is very important, because every time the EU officials address the major challenges Albania faces toward its EU path, the catchword, or one of the catchwords, is the reformation of the public administration. Means that the public administration has a very big problem. And normally, generally, this is related to what is perceived as the corruption of the public administration. And in that case, the allegiances of corruption are always intended, if not expressively mentioned. So, even in the EU eyes, corruption is a phenomenon whose grounds appears to be correlated to the rule of law, or rather to the bad functioning or not functioning at all of the rule of law. Then, if the rule of law is what a courtroom is expected to achieve, to use a metaphor, the elephant in the same room is corruption. So, corruption as a vice of some bad guys in a way or another that do rule in that room. In any way, whether a problem related to the higher stances of politics or to the routine of state bureaucracy, corruption remains within the limits of a restricted body of people, as I said before, of an elite. This elite's tendency towards unfairness, because in the last, that is what corruption actually is, unfairness. So this tendency towards unfairness seems to be inner, seems to be organic, and it is almost self-explainable in this within this elite. Now, what does media have to do with all this? Okay, in Albania, the common sense or the cliche, if I may say, of the media as the fourth branch of government, as the fourth power, and very distinct from all the other, this cliche has been a repeated refrain, a sort of, I would say, a mantra, more than anywhere else, I guess. To the point that the media, very expressively, was considered to be the very essence, not only of the checks and balances between the powers, but also sort of agency of transparency. Now, in a short period of time, as Amila said before, Albania is the same example, like everywhere else in, I mean, Eastern or Southeastern Europe, the Albanian media has developed from a very restricted core, basically conceived of in a very few non-governmental papers, and only one TV radio station owned by the state, into today that, as we said before, which is a galaxy full of everything, including last generation web portals. Now, nevertheless, for what pertains the very essence of what has been a continuous dispute on the whereabouts of corruption in Albania, and notwithstanding its quantifying importance in the public debates, we don't have many of a great mediatic contribution, it seems to me, for what regards the need of transparency and the fight against corruption in Albania by the media. We don't have any mediatic contribution, with the exception of very few cases. It seems to me that the media has been generally a spectator, or at best a reporter, not really a contributor, let alone an investigator in issues related to corruption. And by spectator, I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean in all recent developments in Albania, the Albanians here in the panel must know, for which different high officials ultimately have been brought to stand trial for allegations related to corruption or for favoring relations between public funds and organized crime. And there are two main reasons for this failure, if I may call it so. Also, always in my opinion, the first point, and this is a pedagogical point, and it is related to the society. Now, the first point is the media in Albania has failed to educate to the people, to the society, something which is very important. That political classes are usually the direct expression of societies who lacks them. In doing so, or rather in not doing so, media in Albania has failed to act as a critical point of analysis for what regards a better understanding of corruption as a social phenomenon, even a cultural one in a broader sense. In short, while being a fundamental actor and factor in forming of the public opinion, media didn't show, in its capacity as an opinion maker, the media is an opinion maker, a great deal of courage in the problematization of the issue of corruption. And here, while talking about corruption and the need for transparency, problematization, I think it is the key word. In dealing between the state on one part and society on the other, it seems to me that the Albanian media has failed to demonstrate that the liaisons between the political and the social, between those who govern and those who are governed, these liaisons are indeed many and intense. In a word, and regarding what I said in the beginning, the Albanian media reproduces the same commonplace, that of corruption as an inner phenomenon amid the political elite, without even caring to unearth its cultural roots, without even analyzing it in a proper civic sense, I mean, without even analyzing the inescapable origins that bad habits in politics have in the broader stratum of the Albanian society. And the second point is independence, and it's related to politics. And here we come again in the ground of public perceptions. I think the Albanian media has lacked the ability to act as an independent component of the political developments and the social developments too. Rather than a fourth branch of government, a fourth power in society, the Albanian media has been seen for a very long time now as a sector of the first branch of the government, or better, as the showroom or the PR office of the executive. And by executive, I mean whichever political party that in the last 3 decades had the opportunity to assume the vestige of power, to assume the government power. For every party, being it in government or in opposition to it, has been perceived as the real owner or the shareholder of the media. The rarest example, which don't account for this rule, which we may very quietly rule out, are small media actors whose influence over society and the public debate is very narrow. Saying that, and I will conclude, saying that I see transparency as something in between these two notions, between these two realities. In a way, transparency is something that is missing when media doesn't achieve or fails the opportunity to problematize. As I said before, problematization is the key word here, to problematize corruption. And and this happens in the moment when corruption is treated just as a show-off, as a spectacular event in the news hour. And transparency beyond the subject of a news, even a bombastic one if we want, is the first unattained result when media lacks personality, lacks the proper role as an independent stance, and but most of all doesn't act in that role of social critique, as I said before, which means also as a kind of stabilizer between states and society. And that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adon, for your very pertinent presentation. We have several questions here, so I will only make a short comment. Adon said that this is very similar in this respect, Bosnia and Herzegovina on the one hand, and Albania on the other. I would say that this is valuable for the whole region, for all the other countries of the region. So this is only in spite of speaking Amila about Bosnia and Adon about Albania. In fact, this is very generalizing, I would say. Now we have several questions here. Someone is asking, can we ask through the mic, through the microphone? Yes, I think, but first let's answer the question. Let's see the question that we already have. So we have 35 minutes. The first question is from Arben. So overall, we don't have any media capable of telling and informing us of truth. So, Amila.
Well, I think this is typical fatalism of younger generations. No, it doesn't mean that we don't have any media that are capable of telling and informing us the truth. But I think that it is very important to consider the source of the media, to do a fact check, because have we ever had media who will tell us truth, and nothing but the truth? No, we never had. Even before, in traditional medias were usually state-sponsored medias. So it is very important to understand the context of the media, to see its impressum, to see who is funded by, and to try to collect multiple facts from multiple sources and then see the truth. I know that easier thing is to read something and then believe or not believe, but in this world of polyphonic world we live in, it is just not enough. So there are media that are capable of telling us and informing us the truth, but it is always the piece of truth. It is also worth to know. So there are media who are reliable and not reliable, and I can't tell you, well, how will you know which media is reliable or not, but I can tell you how can you recognize a reliable media. A reliable media doesn't have a personnel who is very related to political centers of power any. It has a very transparent funding, and it has a very transparent work. That is the base for trusting media. It doesn't have to mean that it speaks the truth, but it is the base. If those three conditions are not fulfilled, that media is not reliable. That's what I would say. Thank you.
And Don, would you say something?
Thank you. I think that it is very important to take note about the exceptions. So we must count about the medias which are to rely on. But I think it is also very important, and I tend to agree, like on other issues with Amila tonight, I tend to agree about the importance of transparency. So if the media must be a sort of investigator about the transparency of political class or other forms of elites in the society, how can we pretend to have back transparency from a media which is not transparent about its own founding? So I think that the two issues are very related. So it's a notion that speaks to us about a logic. Transparency may come from what is transparent. And also the judgment about, or the opinion making about the different stances of political power, of economic power. Lastly, we in Albania tend to speak very, very often about the economic oligarchy, which is very related to the political power. So the relations to all these stances and the capacity to make a sort of transparency exam of everything there is related to the fact that who owns this media, is related to the fact that who is the financial shareholder of this media. And for what regards me, I'm not a person which is related to some media. I'm just an observer in that sense. I think that everything that is related to the inner politics, everything that it is related even to, strictly speaking, to the civil society, the Albanian civil society, lacks that sort of transparency.
Now,
I'm sorry for my pessimistic tones, but I have to be fair with my own thinking.
now, a question from Martina. I think this is addressed especially to Amila, if because it's related to her presentation. If traditional media is not reliable, why should we worry about it coming to an end, if ever?
Well, we shouldn't be worried about it coming to an end, if it ever comes to an end. Regarding these new electronic forms of existence, the only thing I am sometimes worried that might disappear, but I know that it will never disappear because it is the fundamental form of human existence, is book. Book will always remain. Regarding the media, and the fact that they will not be very traditional anymore, and that a lot of traditional media, for example, newspapers, will probably disappear in a certain period of time. I honestly, I don't think we should worry about it very much. It's not worrisome because it's natural development. It's just an evolution. It's normal if it happens. Maybe it won't, because you never know what is going to really happen in a society and how things are going to develop on a global scale. But it obviously, the traditional media are losing power. Should we be worried about it? Absolutely not. They're not saint. Thank you.
Amira, since you are here, there is a comment from Dauda Ibrahim. He says, but I think the media in the private sector are sometimes transparent, but the one in the hand of the government can never be transparent. What do you think?
Can never be independent.
Can never be independent.
Well, of course, the government media can be independent. Their job is not to be independent. Their job is to sell you a particular picture of the world and of the society. It's not their job to be independent. And private media, yes, they can be independent, but they can be, when we say independent, it doesn't exist as an absolute term. They're independent from government, but they're not independent, for example, from the business relations of their owner. So it is very important from what something is independent. And I agree with this young person. I agree. Thank you.
Adon said that the media are considered as an anteroom of the government, are perceived in Albania as an anteroom of the government, whichever be in the government, whichever party. So this is the perception. Do you think that this perception is right? The question for Adon.
Okay. I think that the perception is it's right in a sense that each media today is struggling for a sort of survival. It's struggling a sort of survival means that lack very fundamental financial possibilities. So they have to ask somewhere. I do agree with what Amila said. It is important who is financing what, because even the private medias, those recognized as private medias, have their own private shareholders, but we will never know if these shareholders do have something in common or some interest in common with the government. So there is a sort of difficulty in finding what it is very what is basic in what we considered an independent media. Yes, I think that media can't act as independent if it is related to government or something else which is there around. So the public perception is basically right. What I do not tend to agree is that it is not problematized, as I said before. So, and here it is in function what I mentioned before as the pedagogical function of the media, which I see that has failed in many ways in the last, I don't know, 30 years in Albania.
Thank you. Now, another question from Arben. Do you think that this new generation will have the power to lower the corruption? I think this is addressed to Amila, as she talked a lot about this, about new media and so on.
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh, to add on, but okay.
But I hope they will. I hope they will.
Yeah, please go on.
Because I hope they will, because they have a very specific relation to authority. They don't care about authority as we used to. They don't have this relation. So I don't know, will they, but I can hope that they will.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I will relate this question to the other one made also by Arben, which is also taking into consideration, I think it is addressed to me, also taking into consideration that you are a researcher. What are your suggestions that you would give about this point, EDS corruption in Albania? Well, first of all, I'm not one of those who points his hope in younger generation as a matter of fact. So let me explain. It is not sufficient to be younger to be more fair or to be less corrupt. So as you know, from one generation to the other, the vices tend to reproduce themselves. Okay, should I consider corruption as a vices? It enters into this logic. I don't share my hopes only on the fact of being young for this generation, but I do share my hopes to the fact that younger generation maybe they are more critical about political, social, and cultural development and economicals. So maybe they have a more critical attitude toward reality. And the critical attitude means, by this sense, means a more reliable education, more let's say a more relations toward other realities, and I mean this in a broader European sense, so that maybe the roots of the younger generations may be different if we compare them to the older ones.
Okay, thank you. Now, Martina wants to ask a question by the mic. So please, Aladdin, can you activate her mic, please? Hello?
I'm sorry for the inconvenience. So
No,
I
it's
had
okay.
I have three questions left. I was thinking while Amila was giving her presentation on the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina about the PR thing, the man that stands in each institution to give a few details every day. So you said this is a bad side, right? But I'm Albanian, and I'd like to greet Bashkim and Adon because they're my fellow Albanians. So I would say that here we have a lack of that. We don't have any institution when I don't think, well, as far as I know, there's not a public relation person who stands in every institution to give a few information every day. I know that it might not be enough according to what you said, but I think it's way better than being unaware of what's going on. So how do you consider this a bad side, that you have a PR man who stands in every institution and gives a tiny information? Can't you make the most of it? Don't you have the ability to do that?
Okay, will I answer now?
No, I was saying, can't you make the most of the fact that you have someone to ask? They can't. You said that it's not beneficial because
I understand. Yes. Well,
Yeah,
I will
okay.
tell you the way it functions. It is the result of a process, because here, particularly in my country, there was a huge pressure from international community to have a transparency in public agencies, governments, public hospitals, and so on, etc. And also in all of those institutions, there was a lot of corruption. So corruption didn't end with this so-called transparency, but you have a PR who comes and tells, not really every day, every 2 or 3 days, depends, from all of those institutions in programs like Good Morning and those morning TV shows, telling few words. Last night in our hospital, we delivered 5 babies, had 9 surgeries, and 2 car accidents we took care of. And you don't know anything about, from time to time, there is a fair about money, about boards, about who is going to lead certain sector, who has a valid diploma or not. So you don't have any of those informations. But by constant appearing on TV from a person who is so-called PR of that institution, giving few totally unimportant information, because for people of this country, it is really not important information that one hospital has took care of 6 people injured in 2 car accidents. It's unimportant for public opinion, for public transparency. Because so why do I see it as a negative? Because it creates an illusion of transparency, while the fundamental processes are remaining untouched. And when you said you have somebody you can contact to have an information, no, you can't. A lot of journalists were trying to speak to those PRs in a certain affairs, and they just send a letter to media like, our institution is researching this issue, and we'll let you know as soon as we find out. And of course, they never let you know. So this is what I thought about when I said they're playing the transparency. They're sharing tiny bit of fundamentally unimportant informations to give it an illusion that they are transparent in their work, while their political fights, problems with money, problems with corruption, and all of those things, all of this dirty laundry, which is important for public opinion, because our hospitals and agencies are spending taxpayers' money. So it is my problem. My problem is not that you took care of 3 people who are injured in car accident. It is unimportant for public opinion. That's why it is negative. Because when you have a total lack of transparency, like you say you have in Albania, people will once wake up and say, we want to know what is going on in institutions we are paying by our own money. But when you have this illusion of transparency, it is very hard to wake people up. And when international bodies are trying to put pressure for transparency, they say, well, we are transparent and we are giving all the information to public opinion. That's why it is problem. Thank you.
May I add?
Thank you for your
Yeah,
answer.
please.
May I add something? Okay.
Yeah, sure. I have the next question for you, so I think you will have plenty of time to talk.
Okay.
So we can
So we
answer
were
to both.
talking about corruption and so we were talking about corruption and media and the relation of two. But if you didn't know, according to WBSB, which is something about researches in Western Balkans, there's a research or like something that was done to Albania, and according to it, if an Albanian was being corrupted or was found in a situation with corruption, they wouldn't ask any branch of government, but they would straight up go to the media. And that was answered by 26.72% of the people who were being asked. And the other ones, the trust in the other branches of governance were very low. And this was told by a friend of mine who was a lawyer, which is kind of disappointing because it shows that we have lost faith in government completely, and we're going towards media. Even though, like someone said before, I don't remember who it was. They have shares in the media companies. So why do you think there's such trust in our country or people in general in media?
Okay.
What's your opinion on this?
Yes, very interesting question. No, look, I know the reality, and I know this sort of examination of the public opinion, as you mentioned before. First of all, I would care, I will treat these examinations with care. I mean, you know, every time that there are elections in Albania or somewhere else, there are different numbers which said about one party or another one, and in the end, these results are not very, very fair toward what it is the reality of the facts. But second, why the Albanians tend to go normally straight to the medias to denounce or to say the truth about corruption, a corruption issue. I would say because in the end, not only there is a total lack of faith in the institutions, not only because there is a total lack of faith in the capacity of these institutions to render the things transparent, but also because in us, I think there is a certain I would call it a certain love for the show off. So we are very sure that something will go in the news by the media, and at least for 3 days, as the saying goes, these news will be very popular. But I'm not very sure if just telling to the medias about corruption issues, something like that, it is the real solution of the problem. I'm not very sure. And I am really sure about another thing. Corruption, it is not related only to the political class. Corruption, it is not only a matter regarding high officials or even medium officials. Corruption is something which I would say in all post-Ottoman Balkans, and let me say this departing from my from my profession as an historian, corruption is something which is deeply rooted in our societies. But denouncing corruption issue, which is not related only to some politicians or to a mayor or to a judge, it's not the same thing as denouncing our neighbor, as denouncing our teacher, as denouncing a policeman, as denouncing something which is really like us. What I say that lacks in our civic consciousness, it is this capacity to extend our indignity, indignation, sorry, to extend our indignation to something which is very present in our everyday life. I don't know if I had answered to your question.
Now,
Yeah, it was very clear. Well,
just
can I
to
have
say,
one final question?
just a moment. We'll give you the mic later, but because there is a comment by someone else, we have to leave to everybody the space, by Lars, saying people will wake up to reality when we are long deceased. Population of sheep, unfortunately. So, any comment to this?
It is self-commented.
Okay. And you, Amila?
Well, I also think it is self-commented.
Okay. Then again to Martina, what other question you have?
Yeah. So the next question relates to something that actually affects everyone more than media and corruption, which is school and education. So I think we all live in the Balkans. By now, I figured out that we are around here. So as far as I'm concerned, we don't have many programs that teach about media education or corruption or skills that we need aside from scientific and social skills. There's some things that we lack in our education, and I think one of them is media literacy, which is a big issue nowadays. And I would ask that, so do you think the future generations, if they're given the proper education on media and issues that affect everyone, do you think it's going to be we're going to have a better future in terms of lowering the corruption cases or the being more aware of what media is selling us through education? Do you think there should be specific programs?
Well, can I answer?
Yes, please.
Well, in Bosnia, we have, like I said, because of the Dayton Agreement, 14 governments, and the Sarajevo and its surrounding has its own government. It's called Canton Sarajevo, and we have our own also Ministry of Education, and they introduced the media literacy in schools, I think 2 years ago, and I think it is very important step. But I also think that it is matter of teachers, because you have old teachers who could teach media literacy from their students, because a lot of youngsters and children now are very prone to social networks, to all of those internet catches and stuff like that, while older generation is not very prone to that as children. I do believe that it will open for younger generation, it will open a new space to understand, recognize, and fight the corruption and all the societal evils. But it will also introduce some dangers that were not on the scene before. For example, high rise of a cancel culture, when it will be enough to accuse somebody for something and to get enough of people to cancel that person, and it will be done. And the second thing that it will produce, it will be easier to produce massive hysteria rather than real engagement in something. The example that I could see here in entire former Yugoslavia in the last global developments is the question of Palestine. When the attacks on Gaza happened, people were screaming on the social networks. There were protests, there were marches, there was like everything, everyone was about it. And if you're not on social media, which I'm not, people were accusing you like you're remaining silent and stuff like that. And that lasted like 2 weeks. Now the same thing is happening, but people forgot about it. They moved to this, what was that guy named? Epstein thing, I think that's his name. So producing massive hysteria, and everyone talks about it. Everyone talks about something, and it gives an illusion of engagement. And then we forget about that. We go to something else and to something else, along with cancel culture. Those are, I believe, problems when they develop, that younger generation will have to find a way to face with when the full extent of internet activism and speak and fight against corruption happens. Because let's not forget, fight against corruption can be very, very harshly abused. We saw it in dealing with various governments all over the world. The best way to drop down one government is to accuse it of corruption and to make protests and stuff like that. It was the matter of Arab Spring. Yes, they were corrupted, of course, but who put that story in engagement? It didn't came down out of the people. So it is very, very important to yes, develop media literacy, but also I think along with that develop wider social sense in order to understand all the dangers that can come with uncontrolled flow of information. It is the other problem on the other side of the spectrum from not having any information. So we have total untransparency in these state media and old foreign media and stuff like that. But now we can easily have an uncontrolled production of facts, of fake information, fake news, which can create public opinion and create an illusion that we are active, that we are doing something when we are writing on Twitter or on Facebook. And that is the problem. So yes, you will be more free. You will know more than us, but you will have issues that come with that, and you will have to deal with those issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Amila. Adon, only 2 minutes if you have to say.
Yes, no, I will be very, very brief. Direct question and very direct answer. Yes, I think education makes the difference. I believe in education, not only because my life is related to education, to the university, with the only condition that this should be considered a priority. And I mean it also in the financial sense. As you know, unfortunately, the share of the national budget which regards education, it's a very limited one. It's 2.5% of the overall budget. And this is about the programs. This is about the qualifications, the qualification of the teachers. This is about the technological development and modernization of schools, etc., etc. Now, to modernize a school, to render it better for all the pupils, it will cost less than constructing an highway. So I will bet everything on education about everything we have discussed tonight. Yes, I do believe in education.
Thank you very much. And both to Amila and to Adon, and thank you very much for all of you who followed us and for your attention and for the stimulating questions. So we hope to continue. We wish to continue, and I think we will in the spring with more discussion, more panel discussions like this. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.